Hi, Film Addicts, and hi, Moguls. Today we have a dual presentation because we have a fantastic guest, which I think you'll learn so much from. We have David Zannoni. David is a business owner, consultant, and a representative for Vintage House. And David specializes in the collection account management for independent film and TV productions. Let's welcome David to the show. David, welcome to the show today.
Thank you very much, Merlin. Really pleasure to be in your podcast.
Yeah, we're so glad to have you. And can you let the audience know where you're recording from today?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm in the Caribe Mexicano, Mexican Caribbean. And to be very precise, in a very small beach community called Puerto Venturas between Playa del Carmen and Tulum, very known for its tourism vacations.
Oh, it sounds magical. I wish I was there right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There are worse places to be, definitely.
So it sounds beautiful. And David, can you tell us a little bit, because you're in Mexico, but your last name is Italian and you're from Norway. So you have a very interesting mix. Can you just share that with us real quick?
Absolutely, Merlin. So I was born in the Netherlands. I'm actually Italian Dutch. From my mom's side, I'm Jewish Dutch. From my father's side, Italian. I grew up in the Netherlands. I went to school in the Netherlands, did university, and eventually started to travel, first for pleasure and then for business. And yeah, one of those trips, I met my wife, who is Mexican. And after a period of going back and forth and living together in the Netherlands, we decided to settle in Mexico, which we did about 10 years ago, I think. It will be in May. And after moving around a little bit within Mexico, we settled in the Riviera Maya, in the Mexican Caribbean, and that's where we've been living for the last 10 years. And for me, basically working remotely and doing business all over the place, but having this area as my basis.
I like it. The Mexican Riviera, not bad, not bad. So, yeah. So I want to ask you, David, before we get into like your business and everything, I love asking people what is one of your favorite films that you just loved when you growing up?
Yeah, but that's a great question, but a difficult question. I guess there's so many films. I really I love The Godfather, for example. Maybe also a little bit because of Italian heritage, I have to admit. But there's also, and that's more my Mexican interest, my Latin American passion, Motorcycle Diaries, which is, I think, one of the first, were the big films Gael Garcia Bernal basically broke through internationally. I guess these are the films I probably most liked. And The Sixth Sense, I guess that's probably somewhere at the beginning of my 20s, which had a huge impact on me. So yeah, maybe when I was a little bit younger, it wasn't much about films, but I guess it was more about television series, and I loved watching. I remember He-Man and then Transformers. So I guess the 80s generation.
Yeah. So, but was there a Criterion film, since you're from the Netherlands and you're Italian, and you obviously you have love for the Mexican beautiful city that you're living in? Was there a Criterion film that you loved, perhaps an Italian Criterion film that you just fell in love with, that inspired you to go on your career path?
Mm-hmm. Well, there are so many beautiful Italian films. There's the Malena, for example, Malena, which is with Monica Bellucci, which takes place in Sicily. Beautiful, apart from the film itself, but also the way it shows Sicily. I think is absolutely amazing. And then there's La Vita è Bella, which is actually a combination of the Italian heritage and the Jewish heritage. It's very much about, I think, Italian comedy on one hand, and on the other hand, the harsh reality of the Second World War, the Holocaust. And I think that film just brilliantly shows from one way how hard and how devastating the Holocaust was, but on the other hand, how important it is to be positive in life and to have an happy attitude.
Yes, what a wonderful film, and an incredible actor that was able to write that. And let's give his name. What is it? What was his name? The Vita Bella, right? The actor's name was Roberto. What was his name?
I think it's Benigno.
Benigno. Yeah, Roberto Benigno, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. What an incredible writer, actor, exquisite film. How the hardships and my mom and her mother talked about, like, I know that was about the Holocaust, but the Germans came over, and there was also Mussolini that came in, and it was a really bad time for Italians to have all those. But there's some beautiful stories how Italians actually helped during the Holocaust. They helped many people, and so my mom shared some stories about her mom helping people. So that's what our people that listen to the podcast, they have a passion for film, they have a love for film. They are inspiring writer, director, producer, actor, or looking to find their place in the business. And it all starts with those stories that we fall in love with, and the actors. And so I'm going to ask you. You mentioned some beautiful films, Monica Bellucci, Madalena, right? What a powerful Madalena! What a powerful film. She's such a beautiful woman and a stunning actor, and how like someone can be an outcast for simply what they look like and how they treat women. So it's very powerful film, and a very brave acting role that she did, and just stunning pieces that you mentioned. Yeah, it's beautiful. So
definitely,
yeah. And so I'm going to ask you. So is there a director that you really love his films, and if you'd like to give a film shot of one of your favorite scenes in a movie, because those are the most, I think, memorable moments in a movie where it just moves and touches you.
Yeah. Oh, that's a difficult one. There are the Mexican directors who have gained so much fame over the last decades, Iñárritu, Cuarón, Del Toro, with international films and with local Mexican films. But I would still go for Steven Spielberg. And I guess it's the link with the Jewish heritage. I think he's done really an amazing job in putting the Jewish heritage on the agenda. I remember, by the way, as a kid, talking about films, and the one I forgot to mention is Jurassic Park, which I was fascinated by when I was younger, and afterwards Schindler's List, which is of course a great piece of an historic film. And talking about director scenes, I wouldn't be able to mention any directly, but it's certainly one of those moments in the film of Schindler's List which are probably extremely difficult to watch and horrifying, but probably and maybe not even came close to the reality in the death camps. But I guess these scenes, if I have to mention some, probably these scenes are the ones that really left an impact.
Yeah, what incredible director, Steven Spielberg, from fun films from E.T. to Jurassic Park to incredible films.
In other words,
into moving and touching and heartwarming films that remind us of things from our past that possibly we can change and do better. And just, the Schindler's List is one of those films. Like you said, Roberto Benigni's film, It's a Beautiful Life, that just spotlights people's journeys in harrowing situations. And like you said, the positivity or, the sufferings that people go through. And, that's what movies are made of. We have movies that are dramas, we have comedies. We need a combination, because once you see a powerful one that's kind of like, whoa, your heart's hurting, you need one of those like comedy movies or those action movies to just go, I need a balance. And but
absolutely,
incredible filmmakers. So which leads me to so we know that you grew up in the Netherlands, and then you're in your travels and your business, you fell in love and met your wife in Mexico. But I kind of want to ask you a little bit more specifically, if you can be a little bit more specific for our audience. How did you start in the film industry? Like what was making you move around or for your work so that you ended up in Mexico?
Yeah, well, maybe that part is a little bit more boring in talking about films, but So I did university in the Netherlands and started to work, and I was always looking for international jobs. Probably my main passion is traveling. So when I started to really started my career, I guess and it has always been the same. The drive has been traveling. So when I at some point in my career wanted to switch jobs and was looking for a more exciting job, I run into at that point that small little company called Vintage House, based in a small town in the Netherlands, in Leiden, which is close to Amsterdam. And they offered a job to work on international contracts in the film and television business. And I applied, and I guess there was a match, and they hired me. And I didn't know really anything about film and television, apart from watching movies, but I didn't know anything about the business side. So that's how I actually really started. And from there, I started to work on agreements for Vintage House, and mainly agreements. I will probably talk about that a little bit later on. The side of collection account management of international revenues of film and television productions. And I had to learn it by doing the job. And in the beginning, it was difficult, but I liked it, and I started to specialize. At some point, working a lot with production companies and financiers and investors in the US, and later on also creating my own niche, I would say, which is the Spanish-speaking world, which is an almost a very dynamic business, film and television industry in itself. And that's between Spain and Europe and the Spanish-speaking countries in Latin America. And I would also include the Spanish-speaking side of the US, which is also big. And, whether that's California, of course, and but also on the other hand, and more television in Florida. So that's how I started. And eventually, when I moved away from the Netherlands and moved to Mexico, I set up my own business, continued to work with Vintage House up till today, again, still a lot with the US, but on the other hand, representing Vintage House in Latin America.
Oh, so you are ahead of the Vintage House in Latin America, right?
So I'm a representative for Vintage House, the representative Vintage House in Latin America. So the business we do is basically through me, and that's in film, but also television. We're Vintage House is a company very much focused traditionally on North America. Of course, mainly the US, but also Canada, and to a certain extent in Europe, and within Europe, mainly the United Kingdom. So it's very English language focused. But on the other hand, we've been doing a lot of, we've been involved in many films in Spain and Latin America as well. And in fact, one of our vintage first clients, maybe the first client, was actually Pedro Almodóvar, which is the famous Spanish director. So we have, although we are very focused on the English language, we have an history that goes back a long time with Spanish language as well.
Yeah,
and I'm always talking about the business side, right? So we're not involved on the creative side, and as Vintage House, we don't produce, we don't finance films and television series, we don't sell them. But what we do, we are, I would say, very important, small but very important element within the whole structure of film financing and film distribution.
So, okay, so can you make that a little bit clearer to our audience? Because it's like, so exactly what do you do in the film industry?
Yeah.
So you said you don't do distribution and you don't finance, or?
Yeah, that's correct, Merlin. So what Vintage House does, we manage collection accounts for independent film and television productions. And when I say collection accounts, effectively, I would say we manage the international revenue, so the revenues generated by international distribution of independent film and television series. So how does it work? And film production usually comes together with several elements. So there are several production companies or individual producers working together. There's often a mix of financing, right? And that could be equity financing, individual investors, for example, but also institutional financiers or debt financing, right? That, which could be a bank, for example, or individual lenders. And then, and that's the financing side. So the financing production side often has several players involved. And on the other hand, often there is a talent. So whether that's actors or directors or the writer, they get a compensation. They get paid out of the film's budget or the television series budget. But there's also a deferred part, whether that is box office bonus, profit participation, or otherwise. So eventually, the revenues, so once the film gets released, right, before the pandemic, theatrically, and then either on a platform, on television, and nowadays very often straight to a streamer, or by international distribution, all these revenues generated by the international sales, international distribution, needs to be split amongst multiple beneficiaries. So every dollar earned or every $100 earned needs to be split amongst film financiers, individual investors, actors, the director, etc. So what do we do with Vintage House? We manage those revenues. We receive those revenues and we pay them, we disperse them, we allocate them amongst the beneficiaries. And we do it on the basis of the recoupment schedule. And the recoupment schedule is in the industry basically the combination of all the single payment obligations of the producers. And that's basically what we do. And that's a very tiny part of the whole structure, but a very important one for everybody who is entitled to receive a part of the revenues, and specifically, I would say, investors and financiers.
So that means a lot to an investor financier if they see that they have someone important attached to the team, like Vintage House. They'll know that they have like someone who's trustworthy to allocate the monies owed to everyone. So it's very important. Like a completion bond is important, but if they have an allocation team to distribute the funds. So what's exactly is the title called? It's called accountant. You said it's an accountant. The title is a collective account management, right?
It's collection account management, or CAM. And you mentioned, and that's a very good example, you mentioned the completion guarantor. The completion guarantor is another kind of party involved in an independent structure that basically guarantees in a certain way that either the production gets really done, or in case the production, for whatever reason, cannot be completed, that financiers are compensated. So it gives a certain guarantee. A collection account is another part of basically the same structure. So we do not guarantee completion of the film, nor repayment of financiers as an insurance. But by having a collection account, we guarantee that the revenues generated once they are received in the collection account, that every individual beneficiary receives their share of the revenues. So the moment, and we act as a trusted third party. So the moment that we, in a collection account, receive the revenues of the film, then everybody knows, and particularly the financiers and the investors, of course, that the money is safe, that they will eventually get their money. And you rule out, by having a collection account, you rule out, the production rules out the typical issues in independent film and television production, which has to do with, companies may not be financially very solid. There are many companies involved, there are many contracts involved with the whole, production and financing and distribution. And by centralizing through a collection account, where the collection account manager is Vintage House, you rule out all these potential issues of conflict, misunderstanding, etc. So in that respect, we are kind of a security or guarantee towards the beneficiaries.
That's nice. So it's like a third party that's like unbiased, right? And you just do your job, like an accountant.
Yes.
Sort of like an accountant role to pay out.
Yeah, we are an administrator, I would say. We're effectively, technically speaking, we're an administrator on behalf of the production company, and in a more extended version, an administrator on behalf of all the beneficiaries. So each and every individual that has an interest in the film's revenues, and we just execute the recoupment schedule, so the deal terms between the parties as a neutral third party. And why are we specifically so important, I would say, or at least the concept of a collection account, why is it specifically so important for film financiers and film investors? That's because the financier has a big stake in the film, right? Usually, an investor, an important investor or important financier maybe finances a quarter or a half of the film's budget. So they have a big stake in the film and need to recoup their investment and make a little bit of money eventually. But they are the ones that have least control on the revenues, because the production company controls the contracts. The sales agent or the distributors control the distribution and eventually the flow of revenues. The financier doesn't. The film investor doesn't. So, but they have a big stake. So they're one of the parties with a particular interest in having a neutral third party taking those. Yeah, I would almost say the leverage, the power away from those parties involved that have control over the revenues.
So that sounds amazing. It seems like if you're an investor, like make sure you have someone like Vintage House to be your collection account management. So I'm going to ask you real quick. So what does Vintage offer? You said to actors, writers, and directors. So it offers a way to make sure that the revenue gets to them.
Correct. So same thing with film producers and film financiers. Film financiers and film investors. We offer them a guarantee that once the revenues are received, that they will recoup their investment, or that at least they received the funds from which they will recoup their investment. We can never guarantee that they actually recoup the whole investment because we're not an insurance company. But on the other hand, with actors and directors who often have a deferred compensation under the deal with the producers, and that can be a box office bonus, for example, or a deferment, effectively an agreement with the production that a part of their compensation is paid out of revenues as opposed to out of the budget, but also profit participation, right? So if the film does very well and it goes break even and then generates profits, then generally talent, actors, directors, a writer are entitled to share
into their share. Okay, great. So David is talking about how once there are funds that they will allocate the funds, and so it's called a collection account management, or CAM. And David's in charge of the Latin America Vintage House, and so it's a great tool for film financiers, investors to like in when they see a company's investment package, when they're looking at those, that there's a completion bond. And then so I'm going to see, we're recording live to see if David comes back. Hello, David.
Hello.
Yeah, and then perfect. Yeah. So David, real quickly, how did COVID affect your business?
Well, it not at the end of the day, it did affect us. There was obviously the production was very slow between March and I would say August, September last year. But eventually, I think we ended the year pretty okay last year. There was a lot of animation, and eventually, I think the streamers picked up a lot, especially on the distribution side. So not okay, but not too bad either.
Okay, great. And then so also if someone was interested in your services, you have your own company as well, right? That you're a consultant for?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, so which is Zannoni Media.com. So they can go there and see about setting up a collection account management. How big does the film have to be? What kind of budget? How many people would this make sense for if you're a filmmaker? Is it great for indie films, or is it more for international films with a big budget? What would you say is the right size for you to be working on?
Yeah, there's no limit. So we do big films, international films, and we do small documentaries. But generally speaking, it is typically a tool for bigger productions where there's more at stake, right? Where there's bigger investments and there's simply more risk for the parties involved. But again, there's no limit. It can be a small documentary, and also a big international film.
And you've been working a lot on animation, right?
Also animation, yeah, and more, especially last year during the pandemic. And animation projects are often international. They can be co-productions, and a co-production is a typical example where a collection account may be needed. People from different countries, and monies have to go to different countries. So yeah, definitely.
Wow, so you started looking for a job that gives you good travel, and you've been with this company a very long time, and it just works for you. I love how you just found your niche. You made it a niche, and you specialized it, and you've been doing this for how many years now?
Yeah, it's going to be close to 14 years, I guess.
Yeah, so you're very successful, and you're doing a wonderful job. And is there any films that you particularly worked on that is coming out that you like, especially since you're in Mexico? Do you want to share a film that you worked on, perhaps a Mexican director film that might be coming out? Do you want to share with the audience to check out?
Yeah, well, probably not a Mexican film, but we are doing Cherry, which is a Tom Holland film, which I think recently, which is an Amazon film, by the way. Which I think actually really recently was released. Working on Lockdown, which is an HEC film, which I think is about the pandemic actually. No Mexican films.
Oh, we got it. We have to.
All U.S. films.
Okay, you got. Will you refer me some directors from Mexico to come on the show? I would really welcome them to be on the show,
Yeah.
and some actors.